This is Donna with More Than a Review, and we are at Lori Foster's Reader and Author Convention, and I am here with Violet Howe, and she's the author of Maggie's Story, which I'm sure you've heard me talk about, and I'll leave a link to my review in the blog post. But Violet's going to tell us a little bit about herself and her books, and I encourage you to head over to her website and check them out.
Hi, I'm Violet Howe, and I write romantic suspense and romantic women's fiction. I always have humor in my books. I love to make people laugh, so I always try to have humor in my books. And I also love doing seasoned romance. So I like for my heroines to be a little bit older, sometimes in their 30s, sometimes in their 40s, and have a little more life experience. So that's it.
Very good. And what's very surprising, I'm sure, to the reader or to the watchers I'm a huge romantic suspense reader, and that Maggie's Story was my first one to read, and I fell in love with. I'm not as much of usually a women's fiction, but I'm telling you, get the character and you just can't let go. So let's talk about something readers would be surprised to know about you.
Well, I think sometimes when people find out, I was a single mom for many years, and so I did several different jobs in order to kind of like keep that working and keep that floating and be able to, work around my son's schedule. And one of the things that I did, I was a professional crab race MC. Yeah. My friend owns an entertainment company, and I had done several things for them, and he called one day and they were setting up an event. If you, like, say a convention group comes to town and they do some type of like Key West event, or maybe they do some type of carnival event, and so they have hermit crabs, and there's a table set up that has a finish line around the outside of the table, and the hermit crabs are in the center of the table, and people at the event, sometimes they have little tickets that they can like bet on a certain crab with, or it's all in fun, right? And there's like a box, and you lift the box so that everybody can see the crabs, and the crabs don't move, like they go nowhere, they're just laying there. So the whole thing in making it fun is that you have to basically talk like an auctioneer and like get it going. It's like, okay, there, he's ahead by, he's clawing his way to the top. He's pitching the competition, and you have to come up with all these jokes. And of course, there's an inevitable my family's had crabs for centuries. My grandmother was the first one with crabs. Like, the jokes, very much a joke. But hi, Granny. But it was a fun event because you could, the whole thing was interacting with the audience and trying to get them excited. Occasionally a crab would actually move, and then everybody would go nuts. And every now and then, probably like 10% of the time, we had one that would actually get anywhere near the finish line. But people really enjoyed the event. It was a lot of fun. I usually couldn't talk for 2 to 3 days afterwards because I was so hoarse from just screaming and yelling and trying to get everybody into the crab race. So yeah, usually anytime I mention anybody that I was a crab race MC, it raises an eyebrow.
Especially if we didn't know you lived in Florida, because I was like, oh my God, I don't even understand.
Yes, I live in Florida, but we don't all like raise crabs in Florida. It's not a common thing, but that's so.
Well, anybody with children has probably at least had a hermit crab if they've had a boy. So I know my nephews have both had them, and they don't. What is a piece of advice, because we have a lot of people watching that are readers, but they would like to be a writer, so any advice on how to get started, or what should they do?
I think the main thing is to write. A lot of us plan and plan and plan and plan and plan the novel that we're going to write, and we think that when we get to this point in our job, or when our kids get to this age, or when we get to some set point, then we're going to write. And I think that's a mistake. I think that you have to just write. I don't think there's ever going to be a time when everything else is done and all the little ducks are in a row. I never even know where my ducks are. And I think you just have to make it a priority to write and make it happen. And so that would be my biggest piece of advice, is just do it. Like, write, make it happen. Even if you're not actively, pitching and sending it out, make sure you're writing. Make sure you're getting words on page, and you're letting that creative juice flow.
Oh, very good, very good. What do you want readers to get out of your books?
I love to make people think, and I love to make people laugh. So those are kind of my two things. I've actually had a couple of reviewers, or a couple of readers tell me that there's little life lesson nuggets in my book, and that's purposeful. I really want to make people think about things, and I always love to make them laugh. So if I can make somebody laugh or make it funny, then that's, yeah.
So is it harder to put humor in a book, because having a conversation, you can have facial expressions and tone inflection. Is it harder to write it into a story?
I think sometimes it's funny because sometimes I will write something and I'm kind of questioning, like, is it funny? Like, I think it's funny, but is that really funny? Is somebody else going to find it funny? And it also, it never ceases to amaze me that someone will comment on something in the book that maybe I didn't think was that funny, or maybe it wasn't even something I was intending to be that funny and they thought it was hilarious. So that's, you know, I try not to, you try not to purposely be funny, because I think sometimes that falls flat, but I like for my characters to have a strong sense of humor, and I'm a little bit sarcastic, and so a lot of times my characters have sarcasm, and so I think that that kind of comes across as funny.
Yeah,
So
no, that's good. That's good. So anything else you would want to share with the readers?
anything else I want to share with readers?
Well, let me ask this. So for readers that may be new to your writing, which book would you recommend as the first one they should read, other than Maggie's story?
I think it depends on what you like to read. If you like romantic suspense and you like a little bit of a mystery, then The Ghost in the Curve is best. And some people hesitate away from Ghost in the Curve because it has ghost in the title, but it's not a ghost story. It's not a horror story. It has a character who just happens to be a ghost. But that is that's a more suspenseful story that has a little bit more action, a little faster paced. And if you like stories that have a romance, but that also explore the other important relationships in our life, such as family relationships, friend relationships, things like that, Building Fences, I think, is probably a good choice for that. So,
I did notice that you, in the wedding planning series, there was a lot of family dynamics.
yes, yes, that's very important, because I think we don't have my books always have romance, because I'm a romantic at heart. I'm a hopeless romantic. But our romance doesn't exist in a vacuum. Like, we're surrounded by people, and who those people are in our lives and what happens in those relationships also affects our romantic relationship. So I don't think you can write, for me personally, I can't write just a romance without having some of those other relationships explored. So my books always have, they're romantic women's fiction. They have a strong romance storyline, and you're definitely going to have that romance, but they're also going to explore the other things going on in that character's life, the obstacles she needs to overcome, and kind of like what some of her relationships are that shape the choices she makes.
So when you're writing the book, do you already know like what lesson or what theme you want it to have, or as you're writing, does it come out? Yeah.
No, I'm a pantser. I go by the seat of my pants. I have a rough idea of where the story's going, and I may have a few scenes in my head of like, I know this is going to happen, I know this is going to happen, and I know roughly this is how it's going to end up. But as I write, kind of that shapes what the characters do and how they do it. And I don't always write in order. Sometimes I write scenes that are in the future, and then like when I get to them, I'm like, oh wow, that actually worked. But I think as it's developing, I kind of figure out what the lesson is that the heroine needs to learn. And so whatever her lesson is, like whatever she's overcoming and how she deals with that obstacle, becomes kind of the message of the book, of like, because I hope people can relate. I love when I can read a book and relate to the character and kind of get something out of it. And so that's I guess another one of my hopes for readers. So.
No, it is, and everything you're saying, I'm like relating back to Maggie's story, and yeah. And I was also thinking about the scene in the very beginning where she first meets him and he's falling off the horse. So if you get that far, you're not going to want to stop reading, is all I'm saying. Okay, so I think my one last question I just wanted to ask is, how do you balance for your romantic suspense, like how much romance and how much suspense to put in there?
I think it's kind of a hard thing, because you don't want one of those storylines to become more important than the other. And so I think I try to keep from going off on tangents too much. You know what I mean? If I find that I'm doing too much with the storyline that has to deal with, like, whatever mystery or whatever, unknown they're searching for, then I need to back up and kind of give those characters some alone time and give those characters, their relationship, something to develop. But at the same time, if I'm focusing a lot on the characters' relationship, then it slows the pace of the story down. So I know that like something needs to happen. Like they need to have some kind of drama, something needs to happen that shakes it up. So I try to kind of pay attention to that. And a lot of times that may even be like once it goes to my editor, and she'll do like a slash across an entire page, and she's like, we don't need all this. And I'm like, are you sure? Because it seemed kind of important when I wrote it. But then, when I look at what she slashed, it's usually that could be cut. And so I try to listen to her. She get paid for a reason, so.
Very good. Thank you so much, Violet.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm just thrilled just to find you as a new author for me. So, and I highly recommend your books. I cannot say that enough. And you'll be able to find them on our website, and I'll link to Violet's website also.
Yep.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you.